My sister always locked her room. Since we were kids, it was like a rule in our house that no one went inside Emily's room unless she invited you. My parents said it was just her needing space, and I believed them for years. But as we got older, her secrecy only grew worse. She put a new lock on the door, one with a keypad that none of us knew the code to. She would go in and out, always careful to shut the door quickly behind her. If anyone even walked too close, she would tense up, her voice sharp as she told us to stay out. At first, I thought she was just a typical moody teenager. Maybe she was hiding bad grades or a secret boyfriend. But something about it never sat right with me. I noticed how her friends stopped coming over, how she started missing family dinners, how her mood would swing wildly, happy one moment and distant the next. My parents continued to dismiss it, saying Emily was just private and that we should respect her boundaries. But it felt like more than that. Sometimes at night, I would hear strange noises coming from her room, whispers, quick movements, a low hum like some kind of machine running. The curiosity started eating at me. What could she possibly be hiding that required so much secrecy? One afternoon, while Emily was out with friends, I decided to do something I had never dared to before. I tried to get into her room. The keypad lock was too advanced for me to guess, but as I examined the door frame, I noticed something. The window to her room slightly cracked open. My heart pounded as I grabbed a chair, opened the window wider, and carefully climbed inside. The first thing that hit me was the smell. A mixture of metal, chemicals, and something faintly sweet. The room was nothing like I expected. Instead of posters or clothes, it was filled with strange equipment, computers, wires, monitors displaying streams of data I couldn't understand. Along one wall stood shelves filled with jars and containers labeled with strange codes and symbols. But the most unsettling thing sat in the center of the room. A large metal table with thick straps attached, like something out of a science fiction movie. My stomach twisted as I realized this was not some harmless hobby. Emily was doing something serious. Something dangerous. I snapped a few photos with my phone, my hands shaking. Before I could investigate further, I heard the sound of the front door downstairs. She was home. Panicking, I quickly climbed back out the window, shut it behind me, and ran to my room, trying to steady my breathing. That night at dinner, I watched her closely. She acted normal, laughing at my dad's jokes, chatting about school, but now I could see the cracks. The way her eyes darted nervously. The way she gripped her fork just a little too tight. I knew I couldn't keep this secret. I needed help. The next day, I showed the photos to my best friend Mia. Her face went pale as she flipped through the images. "This isn't normal," she whispered. "You need to tell someone." But who? My parents wouldn't believe me. They had always defended Emily, insisting she was just independent. Mia suggested we dig deeper first. Maybe if we could figure out what she was actually doing, my parents would finally listen. So we started researching the equipment in the photos. What we found only made things worse. Mia and I spent hours poring over the photos, comparing each machine and container label to anything we could find online. The deeper we went, the more disturbing it became. Some of the equipment matched machines used for advanced biological experiments. Things like gene splicing, cellular growth chambers, and chemical synthesis setups. This wasn't science fair stuff. This was serious, high-level research that should only exist in professional labs. But what was Emily doing with it in her bedroom? The strangest part was one particular machine. It looked like a small glass chamber with thick metal tubes running into it. According to our research, it resembled something called a bioreactor, used to grow living cells. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. What was Emily growing? And why? That night, I barely slept. Every noise in the house made my skin crawl. Was she experimenting on animals? On herself? The possibilities terrified me. The next day at school, Mia pulled me aside with a worried expression. She had dug into Emily's social media, old posts and hidden accounts that I didn't even know existed. She found a private forum where people discussed illegal genetic experimentation, and Emily was posting there under a fake name. The posts were detailed, filled with technical jargon about creating modified organisms, enhancing human abilities, and breaking ethical boundaries for the sake of scientific progress. The more I read, the more sick I felt. Emily wasn't just dabbling. She was part of an underground community of rogue scientists pushing limits that even professionals wouldn't touch. But then Mia found something even worse. One of Emily's posts mentioned a subject. It was vague, but the way she described it sounded like she was already experimenting on someone, or something. I felt dizzy as I realized this wasn't theoretical. Emily was actively doing these experiments right now. That night, I tried to confront her casually, testing the waters to see how much she would reveal. Sitting across from her at dinner, I asked how her school projects were going, if she was working on anything cool. She froze for a moment before flashing a quick smile. "Just the usual," she said. "Nothing exciting," but I saw the flicker of fear behind her eyes. She knew I was getting too close. I couldn't hold it in any longer. The next morning, I showed everything to my parents. The photos, the research, the secret forum posts. I expected them to finally take me seriously, but their reaction stunned me. My mom burst into tears while my dad sat in silence, his face pale. "You weren't supposed to find out," my mom whispered. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice shaking. My dad finally spoke, his voice cold. "It's complicated. You need to stay out of it." That was when I realized they knew. They had known all along. They were hiding something too, and now the secret was bigger than just Emily. The room went completely silent after my dad's words. My heart pounded as I looked back and forth between my parents, trying to make sense of what they had just said. "You knew?" I finally managed to whisper. My mom's hands trembled as she wiped away her tears, refusing to meet my eyes. My dad's face stayed cold, his jaw tight as if he was struggling to hold back everything he really wanted to say. I demanded answers, my voice rising with panic. What was Emily doing? What were you hiding from me? My dad sighed heavily and finally spoke. "Emily is special," he said. "She's been working on something important, something that could change everything for this family. We didn't want to involve you because you wouldn't understand." I shook my head, completely stunned. "Important? She's experimenting with genetic engineering in her bedroom. That's not normal. That's dangerous." My mom broke down sobbing again while my dad continued. "Years ago, before either of you were born, we agreed to participate in a private research program. It was supposed to help with fertility treatments, advanced genetic therapies, but the people behind it were doing much more than that. Emily was the result of that research." My stomach dropped. "What are you saying?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Emily wasn't born like you," he said quietly. "She was designed, enhanced. They modified her genetics to give her superior intelligence, better health, even increased resistance to diseases. But when the program was shut down, we went into hiding. We thought it was over." My head spun. This couldn't be real. But the more he explained, the more it all made sense. Emily's brilliance, her obsession with science, the secrecy. She was never just a normal kid. She had always been part of something bigger, something terrifying. But why is she still doing this? I asked, trying to steady my breathing. "Because she wants to continue the work," my dad said grimly. "She believes she can perfect it, improve on what they started. That's why we've let her continue, under strict supervision." My mom finally spoke, her voice cracking. "We didn't want to lose her. She's so gifted. If people found out, they'd take her away." My head was spinning. The girl I had grown up with, my sister, wasn't who I thought she was. And my parents had been complicit the entire time, feeding her obsession while hiding it from me. I stormed out of the house, unable to stay in that suffocating room any longer. I called Mia immediately, explaining everything through panicked breaths. She was just as horrified as I was. "You can't keep this secret," she said firmly. "This isn't safe. We need to do something." But what could we do? My parents were protecting Emily, and Emily was growing more dangerous by the day. I didn't know who to trust. That night, I made a decision. If my parents wouldn't stop her, I would. I had to find out exactly how far Emily had gone. And to do that, I needed to get back into her room. Only this time, I wouldn't get caught. The next day, I started preparing carefully. I knew Emily would never give me another chance to slip into her room unnoticed, especially now that the secret was partially exposed. But I also knew her habits. She had weekly lab supply deliveries she picked up herself from a warehouse across town. Every Thursday afternoon, she would be gone for exactly 2 hours. That was my window. Mia agreed to help me. We planned every detail like a heist. She would wait outside as a lookout while I snuck in through the window again. The keypad lock was still impossible for me to bypass. But the window trick had worked once, and I was counting on it again. When Thursday came, my nerves were shot, but I was determined. As soon as Emily left, I climbed back through the window while Mia kept watch. This time, I brought a small flashlight, gloves, and a bag to collect anything important. I moved quickly but carefully, scanning the room for anything I hadn't seen before. And that's when I found it. Tucked behind a large monitor was a hidden cabinet, locked with a simple key mechanism. I searched the nearby drawers and eventually found the small silver key taped under the desk. My hands shook as I opened the cabinet. Inside were dozens of files, lab notes, and vials containing strange glowing liquids. The files were detailed logs of her experiments, far more advanced than I had feared. She wasn't just theorizing anymore. She had been growing fully formed organisms. Some of the files contained photographs of lab-grown animals with unnatural features, extra limbs, altered eyes, abnormal growth rates. My stomach churned. But then I found something worse. A file labeled Subject 0. The folder contained charts and diagrams showing cellular data that looked distinctly human, blood samples, DNA sequencing, and notes about successful gene integration. My breath caught as I read the description. Subject 0. Early-stage human genetic modification. Trial status active. My legs went weak. Emily wasn't just experimenting on animals. She had already begun experimenting on humans. Or at least on herself. I quickly snapped photos of every document, trying to stay calm, but my pulse was racing. As I worked, I heard Mia whisper urgently through my earpiece. "She's back." My heart stopped. I glanced at the clock. She was early. I shoved everything back into place, locked the cabinet, and scrambled toward the window. As I slipped out and lowered myself to the ground, I heard the front door open. Emily was home. Mia and I ran as fast as we could, disappearing into a nearby alley. My lungs burned, but we didn't stop until we were several blocks away. Once we caught our breath, we looked at the photos together. The evidence was undeniable. Emily had crossed a line that couldn't be ignored. This wasn't just dangerous anymore. This was criminal. We both knew what had to happen next. We had to report her, no matter how much it would tear my family apart. Mia and I spent the entire night debating how to handle the situation. Reporting Emily meant exposing not only her, but also my parents for allowing it to happen. It would destroy my family, but if we stayed silent, someone could get seriously hurt. This had gone too far. The next morning, I made the call to the authorities. I spoke with a special investigations unit that dealt with illegal scientific research. I handed over the photos, the files, everything we had uncovered. The agent on the phone listened carefully, taking notes while I explained the entire situation from the beginning. When I finished, there was a long pause. "You did the right thing," the agent finally said. "We'll handle it from here." Within 24 hours, federal agents arrived at our house with a search warrant. My parents were blindsided. My mom sobbed uncontrollably while my dad tried to argue, but the agents ignored them and went straight to Emily's room. They tore through the lab carefully, documenting every piece of equipment, every vial, and every file. Emily returned home during the search. She froze in the doorway, her face pale as she realized what was happening. The lead agent approached her calmly. "Emily Campbell, you are under investigation for illegal genetic experimentation and unlicensed human trials. You need to come with us." Emily looked at me then, her expression shifting from shock to betrayal. "You did this," she whispered. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. She was escorted out of the house in handcuffs while my parents begged the agents to stop, but it was done. Over the next few weeks, the investigation uncovered everything. The full extent of Emily's research was far beyond what even Mia and I had found. She had been experimenting on her own DNA for years, modifying her cells, altering her immune system, even attempting to enhance her neurological functions. The risks she took were unimaginable. There were even early signs of permanent cellular mutations that could have turned deadly if left unchecked. The media caught wind of the case quickly. The story of the brilliant teenage scientist running secret illegal experiments in her bedroom spread like wildfire. My family's name was everywhere. The shame, the judgment, the endless interviews, it was overwhelming. My parents were charged as well for their role in covering up Emily's work. They were placed under house arrest while the investigation continued. Our home, once a place of safety, was now a crime scene. I stayed with Mia during the worst of it, unable to face my parents or the empty house. The guilt weighed heavily on me, but I knew I had made the only choice I could. Emily's obsession had spiraled too far out of control. She needed to be stopped before anyone got hurt, including herself. But even as I tried to move forward, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't truly over. Emily had been too careful, too calculated, and I couldn't help but wonder if she had been hiding something even bigger that we hadn't found yet. The investigation continued for months. Agents combed through every inch of our house, every digital file, every storage device Emily had hidden. But despite everything they found, something still felt off. Mia and I talked about it often. Emily was brilliant, meticulous, and always thinking 10 steps ahead. It didn't make sense that she wouldn't have had a backup plan. Then one evening, Mia called me, her voice tense. "I found something," she whispered. "You need to come over." When I arrived, she showed me an email she had intercepted from one of Emily's old private accounts. It was sent just days before her arrest, addressed to an encrypted recipient we couldn't trace. The message was short but terrifying. Phase 1 complete. Data secured. Phase 2 ready for transfer. My blood ran cold. Phase 2? What was she talking about? We took the email to the agents the next morning. They were alarmed but not surprised. They had suspected that Emily might have outside collaborators, but this confirmed it. A new task force was assembled to track down anyone connected to Emily's secret network. Over the next few weeks, several names surfaced. Scientists, rogue researchers, and underground biotech groups operating far outside legal boundaries. Emily hadn't been working alone. She had been part of a larger operation, one that extended beyond our family. The authorities raided several hidden labs across the country, uncovering additional evidence of illegal experimentation. Modified animals, failed human trials, and piles of encrypted research data were seized. It was horrifying to realize how widespread this network had become. Meanwhile, Emily remained in custody, refusing to speak. Her lawyers negotiated constantly, but she stayed silent, never revealing the full extent of her involvement or the identities of everyone involved. My parents faced their own legal consequences. My dad was sentenced to several years in prison for obstruction and conspiracy, while my mom received a lighter sentence with probation due to her cooperation. The family I had once known was completely shattered. I tried to hold it together, but the weight of it all was crushing. Therapy became my lifeline, helping me process the betrayal, the guilt, and the overwhelming fear that Emily's work had unleashed something far bigger than any of us understood. Then one morning I received a letter. It was from Emily. Somehow, even from her secured facility, she had found a way to get a message to me. The letter was brief but haunting. "You think it's over, but it's only the beginning. The work will continue. It always does." My hands shook as I read her words. Even behind bars, her mind was still consumed by the obsession that had destroyed our family. And worse, she wasn't wrong. Somewhere out there, others were still carrying on her work. The nightmare hadn't ended. It had only changed form. But one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let it consume me again. After receiving Emily's letter, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more happening behind the scenes than anyone fully realized. The raids had dismantled a large part of the network, but small pieces kept resurfacing. News stories would occasionally report arrests of rogue scientists, confiscation of illegal biotech equipment, or strange disappearances linked to underground labs. It was clear that the operation Emily had been part of was far more extensive than the authorities initially believed. The agents stayed in contact with me, providing occasional updates but careful not to reveal too much. They were still trying to trace the full extent of the network, but many of the individuals involved had gone completely dark. It was as if they had anticipated being exposed and had prepared for it. Meanwhile, Emily's trial began. The courtroom was filled with reporters, victims' families, and people who had followed the case from the beginning. The prosecution laid out everything they had gathered: the illegal experiments, the secret communications, the network of collaborators, and the risks she had posed to public safety. But Emily remained calm throughout the proceedings. She refused to show any remorse, sitting silently while the evidence was presented against her. Her defense team argued that she was a genius ahead of her time, that her work could have led to breakthroughs in medicine and human development, and that society simply wasn't ready for the advances she was creating. The jury didn't buy it. After weeks of testimony, they returned with a guilty verdict on all charges. Emily was sentenced to life in a high-security federal facility with no possibility of parole. I should have felt relief, but instead I was left with a hollow sense of unease. Because even as the judge read her sentence, Emily looked at me from across the courtroom with that same chilling expression she had worn the day she was arrested. She knew something I didn't. After the trial, I tried to rebuild my life as best as I could. Mia remained my closest friend and strongest support. We attended therapy together, helping each other heal from the trauma we had been forced to endure. My parents were now separated, my dad serving his sentence, my mom struggling to piece together what was left of her life under probation. But even as I tried to move forward, the shadows of Emily's actions lingered. Small things would remind me of her work. A news article about gene editing breakthroughs, a scientific journal discussing CRISPR advancements, the occasional encrypted message that the authorities intercepted, hinting that fragments of the network were still active. Every reminder sent a chill through me. I knew Emily's obsession had planted seeds far beyond our home. One day, Mia received a message through a private forum she had once used for research during our investigation. The message was brief but terrifying. "The project lives on. Stay out of it." We immediately reported it to the agents, who began another round of investigations. The message was a clear sign that despite Emily's imprisonment, the network was still operational, evolving, and ready to continue their illegal work under new leadership. I couldn't escape the reality that Emily had set something into motion that would take years, maybe even decades, to fully stop. But I also knew that I couldn't allow fear to rule my life. I had already survived the worst. Now I needed to be ready for whatever came next. Months after Emily's sentencing, life settled into a strange version of normal. But even with the calm, I never fully relaxed. Every knock at the door or unknown phone call triggered a familiar anxiety I couldn't shake. Mia and I stayed in close contact with the authorities, who continued monitoring the remnants of the network. The updates grew less frequent over time, but each one reminded me that while Emily was locked away, her legacy still haunted the underground biotech world. Then one morning, Mia showed up at my apartment unannounced. Her face was pale, her hands trembling as she handed me a folder. Inside were screenshots of new posts from the same encrypted forums we had uncovered years ago. The usernames were different, but the content was unmistakably familiar. They were discussing Emily's research, referencing her methods, even referring to her as the pioneer of their work. One message stood out: Phase 3 is underway. Full integration testing begins next month. My stomach twisted as I read the words. Integration testing? On what? Or worse, on who? We immediately forwarded the information to the lead agent still assigned to the case. Within days, a new task force was mobilized, targeting the hidden labs that had managed to stay hidden all this time. Several raids were carried out across multiple states, uncovering disturbing new experiments that mirrored Emily's original research but on a much larger scale. This wasn't just rogue scientists experimenting in secrecy anymore. It was organized, funded, evolved. The arrests that followed revealed an even darker truth. Some individuals had ties to large pharmaceutical companies and powerful investors who saw profit in genetic enhancements no matter the cost. They were building on Emily's foundation, taking her vision further than she ever had the chance to. The network had become a monster of its own, one that couldn't be easily dismantled. But for the first time, public awareness grew. The media covered the raids extensively, exposing the horrifying reality of underground genetic manipulation. Laws were quickly passed to tighten regulations on genetic research, increase oversight, and strengthen penalties for anyone caught violating ethical standards. In a way, Emily's twisted legacy forced society to confront a dangerous future before it spiraled completely out of control. As for Emily herself, she remained in her high-security facility, cut off from the outside world. But even there, her influence persisted. Some of the individuals arrested admitted to visiting her before their arrests, claiming she had inspired their work. It was chilling to know that even behind bars, she still pulled strings. Eventually, the investigation slowed. The worst of the network was dismantled, though I knew fragments would always remain hidden, waiting for opportunities to resurface. But I refused to live in fear. I took everything Emily had done, everything I had endured, and used it to advocate for stronger bioethics laws and protections. I worked with lawmakers, researchers, and survivor groups, ensuring that stories like mine served as warnings for what unchecked ambition could lead to. Mia stayed by my side through it all, our bond unbreakable after everything we had faced. Though the scars of what Emily had done would always remain, I finally felt like I had reclaimed my life from the shadows she cast. And no matter what dark corners her followers might hide in, I knew one thing for certain: I would always be ready to fight back if the nightmare ever returned.